In this episode of CarCraft Video, we're going to do something totally different to this Buick Regal. We're going to LS swap it. No, I'm kidding. We are going to actually put a Gen 3 Hemi in this Buick Regal and see if we can make it to drag week. The GMG body is the metric chassis. They came out in 1978 and were built from 78 till 87 was the last year. You could get them in Buick, Pontiac, Chevy, Malibu, and Monte Carlo, and Pontiac Grand Prix. They were the mid-size sedans, so you had the full-size like Chevy Caprice and Impala. They typically came with V6 engines. You could get a V8. This one actually has a 307 Oldsmobile in it. They make decent performers because they're lightweight, but they have a lot of performance parts that are available for them. These make good project cars to work on right now. They're still relatively affordable, especially when you consider the prices of cars from the 60s and 70s. So you can get all new suspension, all new steering, brakes, wheels and tire packages. They do have kind of a small wheel well in the back, so that kind of limits your tire size unless you're willing to do some mini tub. They're just very versatile cars. The goal for this build is to have it running by Hot Rods Drag Week, and it's only about 2.5 months away, so that's a pretty compressed time schedule. But if we can get the engine, transmission, the whole drivetrain, suspension, brakes in the car running by Drag Week. This is our 86 Regal, and this is the first time I've seen this car. So it's kind of a treat. You never know what you're getting into when you get a used car like this and start a new project. But it's actually in really nice shape. I was looking underneath it. I didn't see any rust in the back, which is typically where it starts on these things. But I was surprised to see the 307 V8. Normally these have a 3.8 liter V6. So it's kind of cool that this is a V8 car already. Typical of the era, it's full of emission hoses and overly complicated vacuum hose routing. And these are very heavy doors, so we've got some sagging in the hinges. Also, Buick being the luxury car of the GM lineup, these would have had softer springs and shocks than, say, a Pontiac or a Monte Carlo. And it looks like this car was a maroon color to begin with. So our red exterior isn't too far off from this car's original color. Not that that matters really. Overall, it's a really nice platform to start with, and there's a ton of things you can do with these cars. They all came with 15 or 14-inch wheels in some cases, so instantly you can go to a bigger tire and wheel package, bigger brakes, springs and shocks. All that stuff's really easy to do. Headers, if you're going to stick with the original engine, put a small block Chevy in it, put a big block Chevy in it if you don't want to mess with the 307 Oldsmobile, or try the Gen 3 like we're going to do. All right, we are driving our 86 Regal. It's wore out, it's tired, it makes noise. There is a lot of slop in the steering. The brakes kind of suck, which makes it a perfect project car. Super typical 80s era GM car. The engines were small displacement, so they relied on torque rather than any sort of horsepower. So you roll into the throttle and you kind of, feel like the car is doing something, but mostly it makes a lot of noise and doesn't really go anywhere in any big hurry. This one has an automatic overdrive, which was towards the end of the run for these G bodies. They got overdrives. Not a bad transmission. It's all mechanical, not electronic, and relies on the throttle valve cable down to the transmission. Definitely the steering wore out though. There's a huge dead spot right in the center of the steering wheel. You can turn the steering wheel almost like 30 degrees and it doesn't do anything. So the first step of this build is we're going to be working with QA1 to rebuild this completely worn out suspension. These things were softly sprung to begin with, and then this one is worn out shocks, so you can totally feel it. And we're going to do that plus more with QA1's full upper and lower A-arms, springs, shocks, front and rear. And I got Bill from QA1 who's going to help me. He's an engineer. Plus he owns a G-body. He's got a Grand National. He's the right guy for the job.
Ooh, how's that feel?
Not very good. Loose wheel bearings.
Well, I suppose we can get sway bar off first. That should be relatively easy.
Yep.
All I don't have to worry about stepping in brake fluid for the next undetermined amount of time. These doggone cotter pins, whoever did these cotter pins did them in the most annoying way possible. Because there's like 3 bends per tang. And you can't get them straightened. Got her. I'm gonna bring this jack most of the way up. This is going to allow us to relieve the force on that spring by just lowering that jack. So all we're doing here is we're just gonna lower this down to the point where it starts to compress the suspension. And then we can take our ball joint nuts completely off. But now we can just slowly lower this. Typically, you shouldn't be able to wiggle your bearing that much.
The washer was missing from in between these two.
Well, that might explain all the play you had on that side.
There's supposed to be a washer in between this and this. No washer here.
Yeah, this washer right here. We got a Monte Carlo steering box going back in with a new pitman arm, so all we need are these bolts. We're about to put our control arms on. These are our upper control arms, and these are particularly our drag race control arms that are part of this level 3 drag racing kit. This is an aluminum lock nut for the ball joint. It's an integrated ball joint right into the arm, and it's a low friction. So we set this from here, and that's how easy they are to move. So in a drag race application, you can imagine, you know, when that gets yanked up, this just, like, you're not working against the friction of your ball joints or anything in these arms. So it should work pretty sweet.
Bill and I both decided we hate putting dirty parts back on a car with a bunch of new parts next to it, so we decided to clean up the center link and the spindles before we put them back on our Buick.
Because you don't want to put junky old wore out steering parts back on a whole brand new suspension, we got all of these new inner and outer tie rod ends. So these steering tie rod adjuster sleeves are a left-hand thread on one side, which is what this groove notates, and a right-hand thread on the other side. I'm gonna screw this one on just enough to where it'll hold itself on there. And I'm gonna do the same with this side. They're just barely hanging on by one thread. Now you can actually use the adjuster for both. They are the same threads on both sides here.
We're working with Willwood to get some new brakes on our Regal, and one of the modifications was cutting off the stock ears that mounted the stock calipers on the spindles. The new calipers will mount on this bracket that actually goes where the old dust shield used to be. So to make this work, we have to drill out the threads here, tap some new threads, and then this will mount on here with some spacers, put our new caliper on.
These are Willwood Dynapro drag race front brake kit, and they're super cool. They're actually floating rotors. It's a one-piece non-vented rotor, and the first thing you gotta do is run these wheel studs in. That goes on there like that. These are quite a bit different from like a autocross type of brake setup. They're super light. Aluminum hub, non-vented rotor. They have these neat little fasteners that go in this slot like that, and that's able to slide, so as this rotor heats up and wants to expand, all of these can essentially do that, obviously on a much smaller level, but pretty trick.
Grand total, 32 minutes.
It's our 9-inch Ford axle from Quick Performance, and we've used them in several of our builds already. This one's nice because it's got the brace in the back, so that's extra support. A lot of 9-inches only have the circle here, so it's got the supports here, side to side of the banjo, plus the support across the back. So this will take a lot of power, a lot of torque.
The original suspension and spring loads are going up into this pocket here, and now we're putting them into the shock mount. So this bracket spreads out that load.
Yep.
And with that, we just need to open up these holes to 3/8 of an inch. And then that's pretty much ready to come in. These are our mod shocks, so compression and rebound adjustable. So these shocks, you can adjust for literally anything. Modules right here can be replaced with different valve packs to give you different valving curves. So if you need more than what is, supplied with the shock, you can get like an extra firm valve pack. So they're extremely versatile.
Putting the rear calipers on just to sort of get them all lined up, and the calipers need to be centered over the rotor or else the pads won't engage fully inboard and outboard. So the kit comes with a bunch of little shim washers, and I had just set this on here without any washers at all. The caliper was a little too far outboard, so I'm going to try 2 shims here, see if we can center it over the rotor. And then once that's set, we can tighten the bolts down and stick the pads in. We got the rear suspension mostly reassembled here. The last thing we have to do is just tighten these upper trailing arm mounts at the rear axle housing. And then I think Bill, we're probably just gonna go through and make sure we got all the fasteners tight.
Everything's installed. It's just double checking nuts and bolts.
Then maybe we can put some tires on those wheels and get this car back on the ground.
These are 17 by 9.5 billet wheels with Mickey Thompson ET Streets and a 275/40/17. Looks sweet.
Oh wow, yeah, look at that.
Dang!
That changes the attitude a little bit. That looks really, that looks really good.
It looks like a fast car, right?
It does, yeah. The next step for our Regal here is we've got a Gen 3 Hemi ready to go for us at Westlake Performance, and then this car is going to Cool Hand Customs in Wisconsin, where it's going to get all the chassis work needed to get our car ready to run on Drag Week. And me personally, I'd like to thank you, Bill, everyone here at QA1, Dave, Rob, Damien, all you guys for a cool facility to work on something, all your awesome suspension parts.
It's been really fun showing you around and kind of showing you, how we do the stuff that we do and how we've hot rodded not only cars, but we hot rod the company continually to make it better and better.
Yeah. What does show?
So it's fun showing you that stuff.
Cool. Well, thanks a lot. Stay tuned for more episodes on our SRT type Buick, the Demon Elmo.